Good morning, everyone. This is Craig Studnicky from ISG and Related ISG, speaking to you 3 months after the Q1 update of the Miami report. What a difference one business quarter can make. At the end of Q1, I think one of the big takeaways was we were dealing with the lowest amount of inventory for sale in the history of South Florida. South Florida being Miami-Dade, Fort Lauderdale, Broward, and of course, Palm Beach County. 3 months later, we're no longer dealing with those historic lows of inventory. Gratefully, we have more inventory to sell to all of these folks that are moving here to South Florida. And I'm gonna go through those numbers with you in a second. There is, by way of backdrop, however, to this presentation, some conversations that are going on in the real estate world that I'm gonna try to dispel today, and it's not gonna be very hard. We have seen in the first half of this year a major correction, nicely stated, on Wall Street. You see it in the Dow Jones Industrials, you see it in NASDAQ, you see it in the S&P 500. Likewise, we've seen major corrections in the valuation of cryptocurrencies. As a result of those two asset classes getting seriously adjusted this way, a lot of folks are talking about real estate in the same vein. Real estate prices are going to be coming down pretty soon because of everything that's happened with other asset classes, combined with the fact, Craig, let's face it, mortgage rates have gone up. I understand all of that, except the data that I'm about to present to you disagrees with those opinions of what may happen with real estate. I think by the time you finish listening to this presentation, you're going to agree with everybody at ISG and Related ISG that real estate, once again, is proving itself to be the blue chip investment that is probably the best place that you should consider putting your money. So let's go into the change of inventory. We'll start with houses. We'll go to condos. Well, eventually we'll touch on the demand curve, which has also changed rather substantially in the last 3 months. And I think by the time we're finished, you'll probably reach the same conclusions that we have, both at ISG and Related ISG. So with that said, let's get to it. Here we are with single family houses. Now, at the end of Q1, we once again were bragging that we were dealing with the lowest amount of inventory in the history of South Florida. Look how much it has increased. It nearly doubled in 3 months. This is such incredibly welcome news because once again, I'll get to this at the latter part of our presentation, the demand curve in South Florida, the amount of people that are relocating, moving to South Florida, they need real estate, they need shelter, they need houses or condos. The biggest demand has been for houses, and now we've kind of gotten some relief. I'm particularly happy with where we've gotten the relief. Let me show you. When it comes, there's 3 types of houses that we've identified at Related ISG. The A, the B, and the C, just to keep things simple. The A house is a beautiful home, relatively new, more than likely modern and contemporary, somewhere on the water, the ocean, the intracoastal, or the bay. The B house, it's just like the A, it's just that it's not on the water. Landlocked, but nevertheless spectacular homes. Everything else is what we call the C houses. Now, the good news here is that that's where we've seen the biggest increase in inventory. And the reason I say that's the good news is because that's where you're going to see the more popular price points. The A house, we've actually saw a reduction in the A houses in the last 3 months. And that has everything to do with the type of people, the buyer profile that is moving to South Florida. We're going to get into that in a little bit. You can see on this slide that the amount of A houses have actually dropped. B houses have increased a little bit, but the biggest relief we saw is with the C's. The price points, well, when you get to the A houses, we're dealing with very, very substantial prices. The prices start from $4 million and they go to $106 million. Yes, $106 million. The price of single family houses on the water, particularly on the ocean, they have skyrocketed due to the way South Florida has changed. And once again, when you see the rest of this data, I don't see that doing anything but continuing to rise, perhaps more slowly than it did in 2021, but nevertheless continue to rise. The B houses, they range from $900,000 up to nearly $30 million. This goes to the great popularity of South Florida. It also speaks very loudly to the type of people that are relocated to South Florida in the last 2 years. Now the C houses, they range more or less from $400,000 up to $1.6 million. Now that's the sweet spot. That's the spot of the pricing that most people need when they're relocating to South Florida. Whether they're relocating for tax purposes or because they're chasing some of the companies that have relocated to South Florida, a lot of folks that are moving here have families. They prefer houses over a condo. The A and the Bs are obviously priced very, very, very high. It doesn't really work well for people in their 30s or 40s. The A's and B's seem to be selling very well to people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s for probably obvious reasons. But finally, we got some relief with that inventory that we need so much that we're calling C's. Nice houses, scattered around a lot of great schools and soccer fields. We needed that relief to accommodate some demand, and it looks like we're getting it. So that's kind of what happened with single-family homes. That's how it's changed. Less A houses, a few more Bs, lots of C's, which is what we need to accommodate most of the folks that are relocating to South Florida. Condos. We're starting to see a little bit of a similar relationship. We've actually seen an increase in the condo resale inventory. Now, I think at the end of Q1, I touched on the vertical house idea. The vertical house is sold to, it's basically a 3 or 4 or 5 bedroom condo in a high-rise condominium on the water. So many of these folks that are moving here from various parts of the world, particularly the United States, they want to have a house on the water, either the ocean or the intracoastal or the bay. Well, they're not very available, and when you do find one, the prices are much higher than most people expect. Probably higher than some of you thought I was going to talk about even this morning. So they're going to the realtors, related ISG agents, and asking, well, what did we have on the water that's a 3 or 4 bedroom condo? And that's where a lot of the buying activity has taken place for that particular buying type. Who is that buyer? Again, it's usually a family, and or it's an empty nester, but they need extra bedrooms for their family members that visit, and or the in-home office. Remote working, we talked about this at the end of Q1, is here to stay. Almost every one of the clients that buy from Related ISG are always asking for these larger condominiums, and they always want to have one of those bedrooms allocated for the in-home office. It goes to the popularity of remote working. But nevertheless, we did add some condo inventory. I asked Athena Rossano, who does all the research for these Miami reports, what kind of inventory did we add? And this is kind of the sobering news. Most of the inventory that was added were 1 bedrooms. We added close to 2,700 condos from Q1 to Q2. Almost 2,000 of those were 1 bedrooms. Few of the 2 bedrooms. We actually saw a reduction, as you can see in this chart, of the 3, 4, and 5 bedroom condos. They are unquestionably the type of property that is the largest in demand. When you look at the next slide, this pretty much tells the story of how the condos are selling and speaks loudly once again to the changing buyer profile here in South Florida. Most of the sales in Q2 of condos were 3 and 4 bedrooms, followed by the 2s, very few 1s. When we look at what's in MLS for sale right now, very few 3s and 4s, some 2s, lots of 1s. Again, it speaks to the changing buyer profile of people who are relocating here to South Florida. Most of domestic, now we're starting to see a lot from South America, but nearly everybody sees themselves spending a lot of time in South Florida, either moving here permanently or making this a real true second home. 1 bedrooms, as a result, are not real popular today. 3s and 4s, super popular. 2s, okay. It shows in the numbers. These are the actual sales results of what took place in the last 3 months, which very much matches what took place in the first half of this year. This shows something that I touched on at the end of Q1. I have been selling real estate for over 40 years, mostly condominium properties. And in over 40 years, the price per foot of the small units was always higher than the larger units. Well, when I saw this graph at the end of Q1, I had to share it with all of you because all of the rules have changed. Call it a paradigm shift. 2020 and everything that we went through in 2020 has changed the real estate rules. Certainly, people like myself have been doing this for a long time. The price per foot of a 3 and 4 bedroom is outselling the 1 bedrooms to smaller units by a lot. And there's hardly anything for sale. On this chart, you'll see to the right, a recent trade that took place, very recent, in the month of May, at the Four Seasons in Surfside. $5,700 in change, just under $6,000 per square foot. It almost sounds like I'm talking about Manhattan, but no, we're talking about Surfside. We're talking about Miami Beach. We're talking about South Florida. When you've got the type of product, a 3 or 4 bedroom condo on the water, if you find a house that's on the water, it's commanding some very, very big bucks, very big bucks. And there's nothing out there that tells me any of this is going to slow down. You know, I do understand the conversations about how rising mortgage rates should slow things down. And we talked about what's happening in the financial markets as well. But wait till you see this next slide. South Florida seems to be immune to any of that. It's either South Florida or it's either just the blue chip aspect, the quality that real estate has always represented to a potential buyer, be it an end user or an investor. Take a look at this data. We just finished the first 6 months of 2022. So we went back to 2019. 2019 was arguably a normal year. We all know what happened in 2020. I was simply trying to measure how real estate is selling in the first half of this year compared to a normal year like 2019, a relatively normal year. 2020, hardly normal. 2021 was hardly normal. We were dealing with super low interest rates. Whether we're talking about mortgage rates or the Fed fund rate, we're dealing with interest rates that we've never seen before. And as a result of that, we saw tremendous real estate velocity and sales volume last year. Theoretically, there's no way that the first half of 22 could possibly have matched the first half of 2021, particularly given the backdrop of the conversations about rising mortgage rates and the Wall Street stuff and crypto stuff, right? Well, look at this. Now, these are prices of condos that are selling between, forgive me, I've got to put my cheaters on for this one. These are condos that sold for under $1 million in South Florida. We compared the first half of 2019 to the first half of 2020 to the first half of 2022. And what we found when we got to 22 is we're seeing much more velocity in the first half of 2022 than we saw in 2021. 21 was the year that we're never going to see again. It was the busiest real estate transaction year in the history of South Florida and in the history of the United States. And still, at that price point, we've sold more real estate for more money, because even the average purchase price has gone up in the first half of this year compared to last year. Let's look at the condo pricing from $1 million to $5 million. Exact same ratio. We sold more real estate in the first half of 2022 at that price point than we did in the first half of 2021. More of them at a higher price. More of them at a higher price. Here we went to the condos that are selling between $5 million and $10 million, and again, you're seeing the exact same ratio. This conversation that real estate should start going down in value, this conversation that real estate sales are going to slow down, I understand the conversation and I understand the underpinnings of those conversations, but the data disagrees with you. And this is the data that I'm buying into because I'm seeing it every single day in Miami. At this price point, we're dealing with, again, more velocity than we saw in the first half of 2021 at an average price that's higher than the first half of 2021. But Craig, mortgage rates went up. Well, it doesn't seem to matter, does it? And then finally, let's look at the velocity of condos trading for over 10 million. Now, this deserves a little bit of a comment. Normally, when we use the purchase price of 10 million or more, we're usually referring to single-family houses, and we're usually referring to those houses on the water. Now we're talking about condos. The pricing, real estate values in South Florida have risen, and they continue to rise, given the popularity of what South Florida is. Last year at this time, there were, excuse me again for these cheaters, but last year there were 66 condos that sold north of $10 million in the first half of the year. That compares to 85 in the first half of this year, with the average purchase price even higher. Again, it speaks to the changing profile of the type of person that's moving to South Florida. Many of them domestic, many of them from New York, New Jersey, Illinois, California continues to surprise us in a very good way for us realtors. They come to South Florida and they see our prices still as a relative bargain, despite the fact that prices have practically doubled in the last 2 to 3 years, whether it's a house or a condo. They still see it as a bargain. They're still buying because they're moving here permanently. So let's talk about now new construction, pre-construction condos, because so many of you think that there's a lot of relief coming with the supply pipeline. And I understand that. There are now 24 condos that are in pre-construction mode, totaling just under 3,700 units. Of those, and you can see on this graph, it's scattered between Coconut Grove to the south, Fort Lauderdale to the north. Of those, 7 have already broken ground. Those 7 represent, probably about 800 of the 3,700 units. The majority of those units of those buildings have not broken ground yet. They'll probably break ground next year rather. We touched on that at the end of Q1. There are supply chain issues, commodities like concrete, steel, glass, in very short supply at the end of Q1. Getting a little better, but still not to the point where developers are ready to break ground on these super tall buildings, these skyscrapers. We're not building 20, 30-story buildings anymore. So most of the super tall skyscraper condos that many of you have sold, the developers have decided to postpone groundbreakings until next year. Okay, but if it's next year, then when are they going to be delivered? For us realtors that are trying to service real-time demand right now, people that are moving here, either from New York, from New Jersey, from California, from all parts of South America now. What do we have right now that we can sell somebody right now in 2022, in 2023, in 2024? It's basically the inventory that you have in the resale market, which we all find and we all fish for every single day in multiple listing. The pre-construction condos are years and years away. So we have to kind of put our heads wrapped around what we have in MLS. Here's an example. There's a beautiful property being developed in downtown Miami known as Aston Martin. You all know it. It's an iconic building. Many of you have sold real estate in that building. I don't blame you. The architecture is stunning. It's on the water. It's downtown Miami. Here's an article from Forbes magazine commemorating the groundbreaking of Aston Martin. They broke ground in October of 17. That was nearly 5 years ago. A 66-story building. It looks as if they're going to finally finish construction by the end of this year. So if Aston Martin, a 66-story building, is taking more or less 5 years to construct, then use Aston Martin as your guide as to whatever building you're selling, any pre-construction building you're selling here in South Florida. Now you have kind of an idea from the foundation work to the delivery of the units, how long it's going to take to build these buildings. So my simple point is what happens between now and then, between now and the time these new buildings get built, we have to rely on MLS. And by the way, 3,700 new condos, not nearly enough. Should be closer to 13,000. Should be closer to 23,000 because the demand curve for South Florida is that strong. Given the fact that these new projects are years away, I think that, again, you can expect real estate prices in South Florida particularly to continue to rise. I understand the concern and the conversations that take place because of what's happening with Wall Street and assets like crypto, but real estate is going the other way. Now let's talk about the changing profile, the demand curve of South Florida. There are 4 major feeder markets for South Florida. 4. One is the traditional second home retiree market that's been coming to South Florida before I was even alive. The climate in South Florida is spectacular. Today is July 28th. Most of you have been hearing about the crazy climate conditions throughout the world. The hills of France are on fire. London, a week ago, had to close the museums and the parks because of record heat. Parts of the U.S. are experiencing scary record heat. And yet here in South Florida, it's been warm, but it's not nearly as intolerable as other places on the planet. I guess my point is that the climate here is still going to attract the second home buyer and the retiree that's always been buying property here. Number 2 would be Latin America. Latin America now has it's resurged in a big way, mostly due to the changing politics. I've been benefiting from Latin America for 30 years since ISG's been in business, and I see a major resurgence of that market looking to put money into real estate here in South Florida. The third market, which hasn't been discussed much in the last year or so, but I think it's worth bringing up again. The Trump administration passed the Major Tax Reform Act in 2017, making states like California and New York extremely expensive to live in. In fact, New York right now is the most expensive state in the U.S. The big winners from Tax Reform 17 were Florida and Texas. Those income tax relocation people are still very much alive. They're still very much moving to South Florida, and that's your third feeder market. And then finally, all of those folks that are chasing all of the companies that have relocated to South Florida. This is something that's very much underreported that I'm going to spend a minute or two on in this presentation because I think you all need to understand. This is a feeder market that has lots of depth and lots of width attached to it. And I think it's going to be probably the main feeder market for the next 3 to 5 years. In terms of South America, this is the map of Latin America, which would include Mexico. The entire continent is now politically to the left. We all know that President-elect Petro of Colombia takes the oath of office on August the 7th. This is the very first time in the history of Colombia they've elected a leftist president. The entire continent now, all of South America is left. When you follow the currency fluctuations of the Colombian peso, the Brazilian real, the Argentine peso, you can see that devaluation is happening in real time. There's some organic urgency inside those countries to move their money out of there. Miami has always been one of their first preferences. This map shows the heads of states of all of those different countries, their political tendencies to the left, and that explains why so much money, so much renewed interest is coming to South Florida. The businesses. The greatest salesman that the city of Miami has ever had is Mayor Francis Suarez. No one has promoted this city with so much enthusiasm, with so much vibrancy as Mayor Suarez. As a result of his efforts, look what's happened here. Over 122 companies have decided to relocate to South Florida within the last 19 months, within the last 2 years. Many of those have decided to open up world headquarters here in South Florida. World headquarters. Let me give you an example of some of the logos and some of the companies that we're talking about. Many of us are talking about Citadel, one of the largest hedge funds in the United States, out of Chicago. Made an announcement a couple of weeks ago that they're moving the world headquarters to Miami. You know, you can see from some of these other logos, you've got Colony Capital opening up a world headquarter offices, a bunch of regional offices. Goldman Sachs, we all know, is opening up an office in Fort Lauderdale. No, they didn't leave Wall Street. Their main office is still in New York City. But this is the very first time they've ever considered opening up a regional office in South Florida, and they're opening it up in Fort Lauderdale. Microsoft is moving a lot of their South American operations from Brazil to Brickell Avenue, a regional office, but nevertheless, they've leased a lot of office space in Brickell, and they're bringing people with them. 122 companies in the last 19 months, bringing families with them, families looking for houses, families looking for seats in schools for their children. This changes the profile of South Florida probably forever. Miami post-2020 is forever different. It's becoming more like a normal gateway U.S. city with spectacular weather. But you add this feeder market to the other demand silos, if you will, that are coming to South Florida. The retiree and the second home buyer. The person that's trying to wants to buy a home in Florida because it's a lot less money to live here. I don't have to pay as many taxes, thank you, President Trump, as I have to in New York or in a state like California. And then there's Latin America. You add those three to this we've never had. This is no small thing. This is Mayor Francis Suarez changing the feeling, changing the profile, increasing the traffic in South Florida. But it's forever different. And these feeder markets are gobbling up all that they can. On a national basis, we still hear that, well, around the country though, Craig, don't you think prices are going to come down because after all, mortgage rates went up? Let me give you some perspective on that. This is from ABC News. The United Nations has forecasted that by the end of this year, the world population hits 8 billion people. Now, let me give you perspective. 100 years ago, the world had recorded 1.5 billion. Now you're at 8 billion. This is demographers call this exponential growth. You've added 6.5 billion people in the last 100 years. 6.5 billion human beings. At the end of this year, India passes China as the most populated country in the world. So it'll be India, China, and then the US. And then the US. Yes, the US is the third fastest growing country in the world. We hit some 300 million people in 2006, and the US Census Bureau forecasted that we would hit 400 million on or about the year 2050. We are right on track. Right on track. Well, I married these stats with this fact from the Realtors Association. The president of the National Association of Realtors in Forbes magazine was quoted saying, we're currently 5.8 million houses short of real-time demand in the US. more than likely grounded in the population gains that the US is still enjoying. Those of you that think that real estate prices might adjust this way, just like Wall Street has, just like crypto has, just don't see it. On a national basis, I don't know how we even catch up. You're already close to 6 million houses short of real-time demand, with 2.5 million people being added to the population of the US. That's net gain every year between now and the year 2050. I seriously wonder how we're ever going to catch up, which obviously moves me into the opinion that I don't see how prices could possibly react or respond to what's happening to Wall Street or even with crypto. Real estate is real estate. It follows the laws of supply and demand. If we bring it back here to South Florida, we're still dealing with arguably the most popular real estate market in the world. And those 4 feeder markets are coming here every single day. What are the takeaways from Q2? Well, it's going to have to put my cheaters on. The popularity of South Florida, which we just talked about. It still remains arguably the most popular place in the world. Supply shocks still persist. These high-rise condominiums, these skyscrapers, they're spectacular. And congratulations to most of the developers who are embarking on those projects. You're building mostly more than 3 and 4 and 5 bedroom condos than we've ever seen. And that's what the South Florida market wants, and that's what the South Florida market will pay for. We just need more of them. And then finally, when you look at the stats that we've just presented, and I suspect that these stats are going to maintain beautifully throughout the rest of this year, real estate is popping up and it's reminding us all once again what a blue chip investment it is. It rarely disappoints. And even though assets are being repriced literally all over the world, real estate remains that steady Eddie. The climate in South Florida remains spectacular. I think that for all of us at Related ISG, we can expect more of what we experienced in the first half of this year for the second half of this year. Still, I'll see you at the end of Q3. If the recent past is any kind of an indication of what the the impending future looks like, I have a feeling that things are going to change again, just like they have from Q1 to Q2. But nevertheless, I think it's going to be very good for South Florida real estate. So until then, be safe. I'll see you around. Thank you. Bye-bye.